Hi guys, it's Mrs. Winduck here, videotaping from the office of my home, and I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of background information on Great Expectations before you read chapters 1 and 2 tonight, Monday night. So, just so you know, it's about a little boy named Pip. He was born into a low social class. His family is all dead, brothers and his parents. And so he's been raised by his sister, Mrs. Joe, who is 20 years older than he. She's married in a really loveless marriage to a man named Mr. Joe Gargery, and he is a blacksmith. And so the premise of the book is that Pip is going to be raised in the trade of blacksmith. But really, something happens in chapter 8 that makes him want to have a better life. You know, he has great expectations for a brighter future. And in the 1800s, that wasn't really something you could dream about. This is a British novel, so there's no such thing really as the American dream in this story. So for him to break out of his social class is going to require some kind of miracle. So that's the basic plot of the story. Again, our main character is named Pip, and he tells the story himself. He's a first-person narrator. And there are a few other things I want to mention. So first of all, it's a Victorian novel. So in other words, it was published when Queen Victoria reigned over England. William Shakespeare wrote and produced Romeo and Juliet when Queen Elizabeth was in charge. And so we're about 250 years apart from one another. This novel was published in 1860 to 1861, so we're dealing with the Civil War in America at the same time. England is in the Industrial Revolution, so we'll see some of that in the novel. Dickens has commentary about stuff like that. This novel is his 13th novel, and he published it 10 years before he died. So he was 48 when he wrote it and published it, and he died at 58 of a stroke. Charles Dickens puts a lot of himself in the novel, so it's considered largely autobiographical. He had a failed marriage, and so we'll see that in the difficult love story that emerges in the book. And one really interesting thing. So, as I said, Pip is poor and he's orphaned, and Dickens has a lot of sympathy for the orphans of the time. You might be familiar with his other novel, Oliver Twist, which is about an orphan, and A Tale of Two Cities, which kind of talks about social issues. But what the public did not know, and Dickens was a famous writer when he produced Great Expectations. People loved him. They would come and hear him read from his books. And so nobody knew he himself had grown up poor. His father had been arrested for debt when he was 12, and he had to drop out of school and work in a factory in order to support the family. And so Dickens is known for tremendous plot twists and a very soap opera-like storyline. And after he died, that's when people discovered that he actually had such a challenging upbringing, a poor upbringing. So that was kind of the ultimate plot twist in Dickens' life. A few terms that you need to know, and it's on a handout that you can find on my website. It's under the notes for today's update. Bildungsroman, that means coming-of-age novel. So this story is Pip's coming of age. He starts out at age 7, and then he'll be in his late 30s when the book ends after 59 chapters. The novel also has a symbolic structure. It's in 3 parts. Part 1 is chapters 1 through 19. Part 2 is chapters 20 through 39. And part 3 is chapters 40 through 59, so they're each evenly distributed. Part 1 is Pip's innocent stage, so it's him as a kid coming of age in Kent, England, which is a really poor coastal town. Part 2 is his sin stage. It's when he's kind of going through some rebellious stuff, and he's just not a very likable character. And that's when he moves to London. And so, ironically, the setting parallels his meanness with its filth and, dirty city sort of vibes. And then part 3 is his redemption stage. As I mentioned in class on Friday, if you were there, Dickens was a Christian. And so this is sort of the evolution of a Christian. You're born, you go through some bad stuff, and then you repent for it. And so Pip will redeem himself at the end of the novel, and that's him going back and forth between London and Kent, and then some other places as well. So symbolic structure, Bildungsroman. A couple of other things. Dickens makes use of a lot of miniature climaxes to keep you reading. He published it serially. So, in other words, every couple of weeks, he would release the chapters in a newspaper and people would read it frantically, which means he was writing it while they were reading it. He didn't finish it first. That's why the publication is 1860 to 1861. He was writing it while people were reading it. So he was getting direct feedback right away. That's kind of tricky. And it's pretty amazing that he doesn't get to edit it as he's writing it. So one cool thing we'll discuss way later is that he wrote multiple endings to the story, I think in large part due to public feedback. So that's one thing. Secondly, I want you to keep track of the characters. I've given you a character chart. If you were absent when I passed it out, it is on my website and you can print it. But we're going to keep track of the different characters, and I'll upload a character chart that can help you with your note taking. Most characters have unique idiosyncrasies that make them special. I think Dickens just sort of characterizes them in unique kind of special ways. So we're going to keep track of those little weird quirks and habits that the characters have, and it just helps us keep the 30 characters straight in our minds. And finally, Dickens uses a type of symbolism called objective correlative, and you're going to need to know what this term means. But essentially, it's a formula for a particular emotion. Setting is how Dickens does this. So keep your eye out for the misty marshes and how that connotes Pip's mood as he's a young boy feeling really guilty and lost in his opening pages. So it starts off, his earliest memory is him playing in the graveyard where his parents are buried, and a scary man shows up and literally and figuratively turns his life upside down. So read chapters 1 and 2 tonight, and then check back the website tomorrow and we'll talk about them. Well, I'll talk about it and you'll listen. Thanks, guys. Miss you already. Bye.